lighting here.
Alright everyone, welcome to the FantasyLabrats. And this week we're going to be talking about Week 7. In this particular cast we're talking about the early games. I am Nani, I'm joined by Oven Mitts and Square. Welcome to the FantasyLabrats. And this week we're going
Yo.
to be talking about Week... And, sorry about that. And just to start off, I'd like to sort of discuss, a lot of people are talking about, when you play daily, they talk about chalk plays. And chalk plays are plays that are big public plays. So what comes to mind are the players like Devontae Freeman, Julian Edelman, DeAndre Hopkins, and Larry Fitzgerald. Those are players that every week people have been rolling out and they've been putting up really good point totals. And the thing is that, do you want to play those players because everyone else is playing them, or do you just fade them and hope that they do bad and that the majority of people take a hit and then you come out on top? I mean, for the past 3 to 4 weeks, we've been dealing with that question, and for the most part, I think we collectively like to try to be very contrarian and don't play those guys, and then in those lineups, they don't do very well. So, for me, I feel like Devontae Freeman. I like the guy. He to me is almost like an everyday or every week play, especially in cash and in tourneys even. I also would like to play DeAndre every week as for now in terms of cash and tourneys. I think of the 4 players I named, those are the big chalk plays. And to me, my opinion on that is that you typically try to roll out with only about maybe 2 chalk plays, and then you can sort of deviate from that and then make your own lineup to try to beat everyone else. But I feel like if you don't have at least 2, you're really at a big disadvantage, especially if Devontae Freeman goes for 30 plus, which he has been. How do you guys feel about that?
I think that you make a good point in that these players, it's hard not to put them in your lineup, right? If you see Freeman getting 40 points or 30 points a week, and then you don't put him in your lineup, you're almost foolish because you're excluding yourself from the green section of the money bar. That being said, if you don't play the guy, and you're the minority that doesn't play him, you get a huge advantage in the situation where he does bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like this season, compared to other seasons, is a little bit of an anomaly. And I know I talked about this with you earlier, but we don't usually see people blowing up for 30, 40 points. Much less do we see them blowing up for 30, 40 points regularly, week to week to week. So, people are saying, like, you have to have Devontae Freeman. You have to have DeAndre Hopkins. Because they have, like, sort of broke the mold in terms of these players that always produce, always. And a lot.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like Devontae Freeman and Hopkins. I'll keep on using those two as an example. I feel like those two are sort of safer chalk plays because their volume is so high, right? DeAndre Hopkins is getting like what 15, 20 targets a game, so he's gonna catch at least more than half of those, right? So he's always gonna have a high floor. Devontae Freeman's the same way. He's a running back, and he'll get his carries, but he's also catching through the air to get half-point PPR value. And I feel like those are like, even though they're big plays, you're not, as long as they're getting like 15 or so, they're not that bad for their value, right?
I think what's starting to happen, though, is that they're being so good over time that their value is increasing such that you actually cannot play them all.
Right.
But before now, Devontae Freeman was like a nobody to most people. And Julian Edelman was a middling guy to most people. And DeAndre Hopkins, to me, before the year, I wasn't even that high on him. So now they're to the point where almost all of them are 8,000 to 9,000, and you have to choose between them. You can't just shove them all in.
Right. Well, so I didn't get my input on the chalk talk thing, but basically if you're not playing someone like Freeman who's getting consistently around 30, you have to choose someone that you think will get more than 30, which is very difficult.
Or at least get such value at the position at a low cost that you can make up for it somewhere else, right?
Right. But I don't agree in the sense that you have to play 2 chalk players, because I only have week 6. So like we get these emails from FanDuel that says this is a week 6's perfect lineup. And it basically chooses the roster based on their salary and the amount of points they get. And this week, Freeman was not included. So you could have, so this week he didn't do as well as his previous weeks.
Was
But
he included? Not included because he was on the Thursday game.
that could also be true. But so how many points did he get?
Like 29.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm like dumb then. That's unfair. But like I don't agree. Like I think you know like he's gonna have bad games soon, and people are catching on. Like so, not only is his salary getting higher each week, that to the point where you have to start making sacrifices in other positions. Where before, basically, you're like fitting him in because the salary was low. Same with Hopkins too. They're both getting high. Um, but especially Freeman. So I don't feel this way about Hopkins as much because I think he's very, very consistent. So is Freeman so far. But I think Freeman as a running back, he's going to tire out, and his cap is getting higher to the point that he doesn't become a chalk, like a must play, even though he's 55% play. So I think you're going to see a transition in the next, like in the second half of the season, where people are going to start playing him a lot less and less.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of raising
because
the
of his
cap. Like,
because of his salary and because of teams catching on to his catching on to the Falcons' offensive play, like their running plays.
yeah, but I mean, in terms of this week, are there in the majority of your cash lineups? Who do you guys have? Do you guys have any of these any chalk players? Like, would you play
Yeah,
two
I
or
mean,
three of them?
if you don't play these guys and your opponent does, they have an advantage, right?
Yeah.
So at some point it behooves you to play the chalk plays and not lose to the other people who are going to be playing the chalk plays, and you have to make your differentiation somewhere else.
Yeah.
That being said, I feel like this week, Devontae Freeman is good. Hopkins, like all of the guys that you would normally pick are good. But I feel like there are some lower guys who have the potential of being as good. Like my biggest example this week is Todd Gurley. He's in a good matchup, and he's cheap, and he has the potential to be like Freeman, only at a lower cost. So I can put him in instead of Devontae, and then maybe at receiver get a more expensive guy.
If I had to guess, though, he's probably a chalk play this week as well.
Yeah, but he's a chalk play at 7,400 as opposed to a chalk play at 9,200. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I understand. But so real quick, in terms of cash plays, who do you guys see as must-have players in cash?
Well, you named most of them. You have Hopkins is obviously a stud.
Yep.
You have Freeman. For this week, I don't think Le'Veon. I think Keenan Allen's always going to be a decent target because he's going to get your PPR value plus the yards. Gronk's always on there. Edelman's always on there. And then obviously, Chris Ivory. You got Tom Brady.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go ahead and start talking about the games then. So the first game we're going to talk about is Seattle at San Francisco. Seattle is 2-4 against San Francisco 2-4. San Francisco is at home, and they are +7. One of the things that really caught my eye on this game is that it opened at +4.5 San Francisco, and now it's at +7. To me, that's sort of like a sign that there's a lot of sharp money on Seattle, and I think I will most likely. One of the players I don't like this game because of this movement is Kaepernick. I am probably going to just fade Kaepernick and not play him. I have a stat here where it says that he's thrown multiple interceptions in just 6 of his 51 career starts, and 3 of those have come against the Seahawks, and he's also 2-5 against the Seahawks. This is in the past, right, where the Seahawks were a very elite defense, but still, I think this is a good enough history to where I sort of avoid avoid Kaepernick and possibly even some of the players on the Niners. How do you guys feel, or do you guys have anything to add?
All right. So in this game, I feel like we're looking at 2 football teams who are going very opposite directions. We have the Seattle Seahawks, who are typically up here, and they're trailing down, and I think it's something like 5 of their 6 games they've been winning in the fourth quarter, and then they've just pissed away the game. And the only game that they did win in the fourth quarter that they were leading in was the Lions game. And you know what fluke that was at the end. And then you have the 49ers, who were really bad at the start of the season, and now they've won, I believe, 2 straight, and they've looked good doing it. So now these two clash, and you're sort of in a situation where you're like, well, am I predicting a bounce back for Seattle, or am I predicting the 49ers to have, the similar games that they've been having, or go back to their original state? So for me, I lean towards the history that we have with Seattle, which is that they are a good team, and I will probably die with this sort of fact because I keep riding the Seattle and then they keep burning me. So let me just go over a couple betting statistics here. In the last 10 matchups between these two teams, the home team has won 8 of the last 10, which would make you lean a little bit San Francisco.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're getting 7 points, which is kind of nice. That being said, Seattle has covered 6 of the last games and tied 1. So in the 7 games, they've had 6 covers. So that sort of sways it back the other. No, this is versus San Francisco over the last few years.
Specific. Okay.
Right. Another important stat here is that the under has hit in 8 of the last 9 games, which means it's going to be a low-scoring game. And what do I like in low-scoring games? I like the running backs. So for Russell Wilson, who's 8,100, I don't like him at all. Given his price point, I would rather have people either above him, like Tom Brady, who's only 900 more, or people below him, like Phillip Rivers, Stafford. Russell Wilson's too middling, and his price is too great for what he actually brings to the table. And because these are divisional opponents, I have some stats on Russell Wilson versus Seattle, or Russell Wilson versus San Francisco. In the last 6 regular season matchups, he's only thrown for over 200 yards 1 time, and he's only thrown for multiple TDs 1 time. He hasn't rushed for more than 30 yards in any game versus San Francisco in his career, and this season alone, he's only had basically 1 good rushing game. No rushing TDs. So there's just not enough upside for me to spend $8,000 on him of my salary cap when I can have someone else. The player that I do like on the Seattle is Marshawn Lynch. He's back off injury. Rawls, as we saw last week, is pretty much not a factor, and he didn't get hurt in the drag race. So
is he as quick as his car, though?
Yeah, so apparently he was drag racing or not drag racing. It's not really clear, but he wasn't hurt in the alleged drag race, so I like him. A stat here, in 7 of the last 10 games versus San Francisco, he's gone over 100 yards. He has 5 games with 1 or more TD, and I see around 22 to 24 touches for him in this game. So it screams opportunity, and it screams that he's probably going to get into the end zone, which is not something he's done much this year. Another player on Seattle worth considering is Jimmy Graham. There's been all this talk back and forth all year about, is there chemistry? Are they going to use him? Should we just send him back to New Orleans? I think this last game sort of proved that Jimmy Graham is relevant in their offense. They threw to him 12 times. The next highest guy was Baldwin, and he only had 4 targets. And he got 146 yards on those targets. So I really think that Jimmy Graham's in play. That being said, at his price, which is 6,300, I would rather be going for someone lower or for Gronk. Does anybody have any contradictions on those for the 49ers or the Seattle?
I think Jimmy Graham will have a fine game. Not as good as the one you named, but I think I agree with everything you say. I just have something in addition.
Okay.
I think that Lockett will have
Which Lockett? There's 2 Lockets.
The wide receiver.
The wide receiver, okay. Well, they're both wide receivers.
Are they both wide receivers?
Yeah, it's so stupid.
The one that has more fantasy relevance.
Tyler Lockett, I think, is the more relevant one.
Yeah. So I think that Lockett will have a good game. San Francisco is bad against the pass. In terms of yards, they give up the most yards to wide receivers and points. So I think Lockett is up and coming. He's starting to favor. I think in key situations, Wilson is looking towards him. So I like him in this matchup. But I don't like the quarterback, especially in this under type game where the over-under is 42 and stuff.
Yeah,
but
I think for cash and for GPP, for the most part, I'm staying away from the quarterback and the passing game. And that includes Jimmy Graham, despite the fact that there's chemistry. This game is just not setting up to be a shootout. So I like Marshawn Lynch on Seattle. For the 49ers, I agree with your sentiments that I do not like Colin Kaepernick in this game. like you said, there was tons of interceptions, and in 5 games versus Seattle, he's thrown 2 TDs and 7 interceptions. His
Yeah.
running stats versus Seattle are unimpressive, and he has 1 game in the 5 games he's played over 200 yards passing. So they're also not passing in these games. So you don't like either of the quarterbacks, which makes you think that you would like Carlos Hyde, but he's questionable to play the game. In the games he's been playing, he's been leaving in the middle of the game and coming back and all of that. So you can't really trust him to
Yeah.
finish the game. Seattle's only allowed 2 rushing TDs this season, so I don't see them starting to allow it against Carlos Hyde, who is a little bit banged up. You can look at the bright side and say Jonathan Stewart lit Seattle up last week, so why can't Carlos Hyde? But if you really look at the stats, it shows that the Panthers were moving the ball through the air, and then Jonathan Stewart was sort of picking up the leftovers near the red zone. So I don't like Carlos Hyde. And as I said before, with not liking the quarterback, I'm not going to like the receivers either. Anquan Bolden doesn't have a good history against Seattle. Torrey Smith is so hit or miss that he's almost unplayable, unless you're like taking some deep GPP shot. If I am taking a receiver here, a flyer, I'm taking Vernon Davis, and it's because Seattle is really, really bad against the tight end. And in the last 2 games, they've given up over 20-plus fantasy points to Eifert and Olsen. And they actually lost the game to Olsen, and they've shown that they're really vulnerable in the middle of the field, and that's where Vernon Davis is going to be running his routes. So if I am taking a flyer on any 49ers pass catcher, it's Vernon Davis.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, Vernon Davis is priced at 4,800, right? So he's one of the
Yeah.
cheapest options for tight
The
end.
only hedge I have there is that he had 1 target last week. Only 1.
And that he's questionable this week.
Yeah, he's questionable too. There's not a whole lot of upside there.
All right, so the next thing we'll talk about is Buffalo versus Jacksonville. Buffalo is 3-3 versus Jacksonville 1-5. Jacksonville is at home, and they are +6. To me, Jacksonville this year has been surprisingly good. They're fantasy
Fantasy-wise.
good. Yeah, they're really good fantasy. Bortles is putting up a lot of numbers. His receivers are putting up numbers, and now Julius Thomas is also being a part of it now. I think all of them are pretty relevant in terms of fantasy. Good GPP plays. Some of them are even cash plays. You guys have anything to add to that, or you guys?
Yeah. So overall, like you said it, there are a lot of fantasy relevant players. So I'm going to mention the spread. It's -6 Buffalo. You said it. So in terms of the game, I think actually Jacksonville will cover against Buffalo just because of the injuries. But on paper, Jacksonville allows the most points. So they allow 29.3 points against their opponents, which is the highest in the league. And their offense is the 3rd lowest point scoring team in the league. But Buffalo has a backup quarterback who looks decent. Sammy Watkins is out. They're a little banged up. So with all that said, for the spread betting, I would pick Jacksonville. But for DFS and notable players, Jacksonville always has the usual suspects. I've said this last time. It was always Yeldon, Robinson, Hearns. And now that Thomas is back, it's Thomas. So those are the people who get plays, and they will get plays. So it's all the usual suspects. So this week, I would also I would consider Robinson, Hearns, and Thomas, and maybe even Bortles if price is low enough and he could have a good game. On Buffalo side, I like LaShawn McCoy. He's going to have a pretty good game against Jacksonville's defense. Jacksonville has the most rushing attempts, has one of the most rushing attempts against, and gives up a decent amount of yards. And LaShawn McCoy looks good. And someone I might consider as a deep play was Chris Hogan. I forgot exactly why, but I think I didn't write down the stats. I think I did this especially because I don't like the Jacksonville corners, and they allow a lot of passing yards. And Chris Hogan has been starting to get targets in the last couple games, so I might consider him as a deep play.
Yeah, so for me, I think that Jacksonville's defense is terrible, as you said. They give up to the run. They give
You're cutting out.
the pass.
Oh.
But my mic went off. I think that the pass offense for the Buffalo is pretty poor. Like you have Robert Woods, as you said, and Chris Hogan, and it's just like, who? Like I've never heard of these guys before. Why would I play these guys? So they're definitely just deep GPP flyers. The one player to consider on the team that sort of fell off the map 2 weeks ago and then came back on the map was Charles Clay. Definitely worth looking at Charles Clay because he is their primary option. And if we are to believe that the Jacksonville defense is very penetrable, they would use Clay as the target, the main target.
Yeah, Jacksonville is ranked 21st against the pass. They've given up 10 touchdowns with 1 interception, whereas Buffalo is 23rd against the pass, 13 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So they're sort of comparable, like bad defenses, and it's pretty friendly in terms of picking up any of the receivers in this game. I also really like Charles Clay in this game as well. He last week had 13 targets, which is like 6th in the league in terms of catching targets. He caught 8 of them. He didn't produce a monster line, but he is heavily involved and he's worth the play. I'd even say you can play him in cash and GPP as well. So he's worth a look in terms of that.
Yeah, and even the defense is, let me just say, the defense is so bad that it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. The quarterback is worth considering. I do also want to concur that LaShawn McCoy, probably a really good play.
Any
Only thing that
Go ahead, sorry.
Only thing that scares me about this game is that even though both defenses are so bad, the over/under is still like almost a min this week. It's 42.45. So that's why I'm leaning towards staying away from like everyone in this game. But I like in this particular game, I'd probably play LaShawn McCoy, and if I was daring enough, I'd play Chris Hogan. So
any players you guys don't like?
Yeah, I actually am not too big on the Jacksonville passing game this time. They were pretty effective against shutting down AJ Green last week, and the Bills were effective against shutting down AJ Green and Tyler Eifert. And the comparable players here would be Julius Thomas and Allen Robinson. So, I think I haven't usually liked Hearns, but this is the time that I would actually like Hearns because the other two guys are drawing so much attention. And they're going to be throwing because most likely they're going to be behind.
Yeah, I don't like Yeldon in this game. The Buffalo Bills are pretty good against the rush. They're ranked 4th, and they've only allowed 3 touchdowns so far this season. So that's someone that I would probably fade in this game.
If he plays.
If he even plays. Yeah. And if he doesn't play, you don't touch the other running back. You just leave it alone. Like, you just let it rot. Anything for you, Square? Any players that you were specifically fading?
Yeah. There's like for DFS and big tournament plays, I'm only probably going to really consider LaShawn McCoy and then not even think about anyone else.
So you're fading everyone else.
I'm fading everyone.
I think that's true. That's right. Yeah. I think that's what you should do.
Yeah.
All right. So the next game we're talking about is Tampa Bay at Washington. Tampa Bay is 2-3 versus Washington 2-4. Washington is -3.5 at home. You guys have anything to say about this one?
Yeah, so Washington here is always going to be, this is the same thing we say every week. You don't really want to attack them on the run. You want to attack them on the pass. But what we've been seeing the past 2 weeks is Freeman, who's a running back, go crazy against them. And then Chris Ivory, who's a running back, go crazy against them. So I don't know if we're still buying into the fact that Washington's a team you cannot run on. That being said, I feel like this week they sort of get back on track because Tampa Bay's run offense isn't as powerful as I feel like those other teams are, and offensive line isn't as powerful as those other teams are. So on Tampa Bay, I'm into the passing game, and I'm not on Doug Martin in the running game. I think that Jameis Winston is a fine GPP play, and he's 6,500, which means he's cheap enough to sort of punt away the position, hope that you get anywhere from 12 to 15 points, and then fill up on the chalk guys we talked about earlier, Freeman, Hopkins. I don't recommend him in cash, obviously. He's an interception machine. But at 6,500, I'd consider it. As for Mike Evans, he's 7,500. And just to put in perspective who's around him, Amari Cooper is below him. Landry is below him. Robinson is below him. Steve Smith is below him. These are all guys who have produced and produced a lot. And Mike
Yeah.
Evans has had one decent game where he got 7 catches for 100 yards, but he still has not gotten a touchdown. So I think that 7,500, he's too expensive to really play with. And he's only catching 38% of his targets. And considering how many targets he's gotten, it's kind of painful to look at. Like we dream of all these other guys getting targets, and this guy gets them, and he can't do anything with them. Now I'm going to contradict myself and say that I really like him this week. The reason for that is, yes, the targets are there. I feel like they're going to be losing this game, so they're going to be throwing. And in Mike Evans' blow-up game sort of last year, it was versus Washington, and he ended up with seven catches on 9 targets, 2 TDs, and 209 yards.
Wow.
So it's really hard to look away
Yeah.
from 209 yards. Like, my initial, when I was looking at this analysis, was like, I need to just dismiss Mike Evans, but that stat line is insane and hard to ignore. So I think he's going to be low owned, and you might as well, try to capitalize on that. I don't like Vincent Jackson. I feel like he's sort of like this red herring. People see his name a lot. They're like, oh, he's getting touchdowns, but he's had 1 game this year of greater than 4 receptions. He has 2 TDs, which makes people think he's better than he is, but I'm not really messing with him. What scares me is that Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans both get a ton of targets, and their receptions are super low, which makes me think that really the problem is Jameis Winston, and that there's nothing we can do. Like, bring back McCown. When McCown was the quarterback last year, Mike Evans was doing just fine, and Vincent Jackson was a little bit irrelevant because Mike Evans was so good.
Yeah.
So, I think enter at your own risk given the quarterback situation, but I do think that there is a big game potential for Mike Evans this time. For Doug Martin, I think his price is a little bit inflated because he got that 30 performance versus Jacksonville, which, as we know, is like a pretty bad defense altogether. Supposedly, we're supposed to believe that Washington's good at stopping the run. So the situation is a little bit too unknown for me, given we don't know really how the defense is playing right now, and we don't know how good Doug Martin really is, so I'm sort of fading him. On the Washington side, again, like last week, I'm not touching the run game. This is a nice place to play him because I see Washington trying to run the ball a lot, control the clock, keep it out of Kirk Cousins' hands because he keeps throwing those pick sixes. But you just don't know which guy is going to get the run, so you got to stay away from the run game. Because Kirk Cousins is so prone to throwing interceptions, I think they're going to do a lot of checkdowns, and those benefit Garcon and Crowder, whose both yards at catch is incredibly low. So I think for their cheap price, I would probably take them. Garcon over Crowder, he's only 300 more than Crowder, and he's the number 1 option, so I think I would go there.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Tampa Bay is ranked 25th against the rush, and Washington is ranked 23rd against the rush. I do agree with you that Washington, they look good against the run, but they just had to go against Freeman, and then they also had to go against Ivory, and so they just racked up a ton of yards and a ton of and touchdowns against them, which really hurt them as a defense. But I do think they sort of come back and they really stop the running game in Tampa Bay. But so for me, I do fade Doug Martin in this game. I don't really like him. I don't play him in either cash or tourneys. The other way, though, because Tampa Bay is weak against the run, I do like the running game for Washington. It's just, who do you pick?
Yeah.
That's the hard part, right? Like, I really want to invest in one of the running backs, but it's just so hard to pick the right one. So
Right.
because of that, you also stay away.
I'm actually I'm feeling Matt Jones in this game
Me
because
too. I am.
because last game it was sort of the prime time you would think for Alfred Morris. I mean, there was no Matt Jones.
Yeah.
You
But
thought
they were-
Alfred Morris would get all the carry, and he didn't. He wasn't when they were still in the game. He wasn't a part of the game plan. So it just makes me think that there's a change of guard, and I think it's coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to guess, who do you guys say? Which running back this week? I'm also on the Matt Jones this week. You're on Matt Jones, Oven Mitts. How about you, Square? Who do you feel? Thompson,
I have-
Jones, or Alfred Morris?
I honestly have no idea. Alfred Morris has a name. He has a history. Like, he has a bigger name, right? In this matchup, and this year, he just has not looked like the Alfred Morris that I've seen before.
Yep.
Which makes me shy away from him. And the next one is Matt Jones. So that's I don't know. I'll default into Matt Jones. I don't know if you're looking for the public play, which is Alfred Morris probably in this situation.
No, that's fine. But yeah, I think everything else, in terms of pass, Tampa Bay is fourth against the pass, which does scare me a little bit in terms of playing any of those Washington players. They do have they have allowed the 12 TDs though, to 3 interceptions, so they give it up in the red zone, which is sort of nice. Washington is 8th against the pass, and they've given 9 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Mike Evans. I've rolled Mike Evans out in so many tourneys, and he's burned me so many times with so many targets. So
Same with Vincent Jackson, man. I have the same experience with Vincent Jackson.
It's really hard to trust them, and I'm just gonna stay away from this scenario. Like there's other players I'd rather roll out than those guys. But
Hey, if you're off
just
of him,
remove.
gives me good reason to be on him.
You should just get rid of Winston. Put in Glennon.
Oh, is Glennon the backup still?
Yeah.
Glennon was good. Ish.
Oh, Reed's coming back this game, or it looks like he's
Jordan
looking
Reed?
like he's coming back this game. Is he a
And
potential play?
Safarian Jenkins. No, for me, I'm not playing Jordan Reed, obviously because of the risk, the fact that we might still see some Derek Carrier, and I don't know how many times we've seen Jordan Reed come back, and then right away he's back on the sidelines.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. He's good when he's in, but he's not good when he's on the sidelines. So
Right. I think I've had my run with him this year. Like
What?
I think I've had my run with him this year just because, at the start of the year he's not injured, so you're like, okay, he's all in one piece. But now he's like cracked some stuff, and that stuff's fragile. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
all right. So we're gonna talk about the next game: Atlanta at Tennessee. Atlanta is -3.5 against Tennessee +3.5. Tennessee is +3.5 at home.
Mhm.
Before I get started, we actually have a viewer question from HelloFool. And his question is, got some love for the Browns Barnkowski this week?
Barnage plus Gronkowski.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't.
You don't?
Actually, I don't like Barnage. I feel like he's been a fluke, and I know I'm probably the only one saying this, but in this last game versus Denver, you're like, okay, that's a bad matchup. He shouldn't do good. And then he turns up with 14 fantasy points. But he did only catch 3 balls for 39 yards. They just happened to be balls in the end zone, which made him look good. I think for the Browns, I'm sticking with Travis Benjamin, whose targets are consistent. He said over 10 targets in 4 straight games. Whereas Barnage is a little bit more up and down, and I feel like they're going to start game planning him. And when you game plan a guy who didn't have skills for the last 7 years and then all of a sudden does, I think you can probably do it. Plus, he's not physically too imposing. He's not like Gronk.
Square?
You want to eat your words of admits this week?
I've eaten them. Every week I've been off Barnage, and I've eaten my words.
I'm on the Barnage train.
Wow.
Like put me on. He might not be better than Gronk, but he'll be top 4 tight end every week, I think. So why not? I'm all on.
I can give you a why not, actually. And it's that Jeff Fisher, the coach of the team he's opposing, is hell to play against. He doesn't let the tight ends do anything, and this year he's only allowing 5.6 fantasy points to opposing tight ends. The Rams, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Nani and I actually have a rule that you don't play tight ends versus Jeff Fisher off defense.
HelloFull, it really depends on what you're asking about. If this is standard and he's your best tight end option, of course you just roll him out. But for us, we see him as to add on to what Ovenmus was saying is that the Rams are pretty good against the tight end. If you look at their matchups, the first week they went against Jimmy Graham and they gave him 1 touchdown and 50 yards. Past that, they've not given up any touchdowns. Against Washington, they get 80 yards. Pittsburgh, they give 17 yards. Arizona, 25 yards. Green Bay, 45 yards. They're not very good tight ends, but they do hold them up pretty well. I think if I had to guess, in terms of if you want a points for the tight end, I would say is about plus or minus 10, and I would say Barnage gets around 10 or less. How do you guys feel about that? You guys are under or over 10?
I would say 10's about right.
I'm over 10.
You're over
I'm
10.
still on it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at with that. Use that information how you feel. But I think if If you're talking about standard and this is for your roster and he's your best option, you roll him out. He is a good tight end at this point in the season. He's most likely going to end up a top 10 tight end this year, given the way he's given up like 14 points a game. But are we expecting this 20-point performance that he burned us on when we predicted him to be bad? I highly doubt he'll get another 20-point performance. I'll say that, and we'll see. All right. So sorry, we'll go back to the
Tennessee and Atlanta.
Tennessee game. Tennessee Atlanta. Atlanta is 5-1 against Tennessee 1-4. Tennessee's at +3.5.
Mm-hmm. So I think it opened at, it's still early, but it opened at -5.5. And to me, if you just look at these two teams on paper, like that seems small to me. Atlanta is a pretty good offensive team. And then it moved to -3.5. So it seems really small, which makes me suspicious. With that said, I think the spread is scaring me from most players on Atlanta.
Before you go on, can I actually give a comment about the spread stuff?
Yeah, it's early.
Yeah,
And for
one it's early, but Vegas has a tendency when they don't know how a game's going to go,
Right.
to put a spread at what Bill Simmons calls the Vegas zone, and that's anywhere from 4 to 5.5. And then when money comes in, they'll either put it at 3 or they'll put it at 7. So it's now moving towards 3. So I agree with your analysis, but I'm just saying the movement from 4 to 1 is not a huge deal.
Right. Okay. With that said, the rest of the stuff I'm gonna say might not mean anything to anyone, but it's scaring me from most players on Atlanta. Like you still play Julio and Freeman, and
Sure.
like you roll with them. Like they're chalk plays, right?
I think you also even confidently roll out Freeman against Tennessee. They're ranked 28th against the rush.
Yep.
You just do it. There's no question about it.
Yep. So I have the same exact thing down where Tennessee is bad against the rush in terms of yards, and they're good against the pass, which pushes them to run the ball more. So Freeman's a good play. Julio's Julio, so he'll still get play. So that's all I have on the Atlanta in terms of DFS play. For Tennessee, I didn't want to put this down, but I'm gonna roll with it. I said Kendall Wright last week or 2 weeks ago will have a good game. Oh no, last week because of the squeaky wheel.
We all
he had
did.
the squeaky wheel. We all said that he's gonna have a good game. So this week, I think that.
I mean, wait.
Wheel,
In our defense, though, Mariota got injured, so let's throw that out there, and that he was not 100%, and so he didn't get his full targets. He only
Right,
had 4
but-
targets.
Wasn't he also on Revis Island? Was that game or no?
Also.
No.
No.
No, they're not that game.
No, not that game.
No. But this game against Atlanta, who's not the greatest against the pass, I think their defense is very middly. I think that there's going to be what I call the delayed squeaky wheel effect, where you wait a week and then you get the targets. So I think Kendall Wright might be of consideration. Everyone else I'm off of. I'm fading. Sankey, meh. Mariota, meh. So that's all I have for Tennessee.
Yeah, so I think most likely the quarterback's going to be Mettenberger, because Mariota's been, I think, ruled out for 2 to 3 weeks. Do we know for
He's
sure?
not ruled out yet. He's not ruled out yet.
It's not for sure. He does have a grade 2 sprain, but
Yeah.
he's practicing. He's practicing like he's going to play, even though
Seriously?
yeah,
He said himself that he feels 100%.
yeah.
But who's to trust that, right? But
Wow.
That's so questionable.
Wow. Okay, well, I think this is then in one of those cases then when it's like, if the quarterback is, then you play Kendall Wright. If it is Mettenberger, we haven't seen a whole lot out of Mettenberger. We're actually looking up his stats today. I probably fade the entire Titan offense if Mettenberger is a starter. And Mariota, after he got hurt in the game, their offense became pretty much immobile. So I don't think even if he plays, I'm probably not touching a Titan. And then obviously you touch the usual suspects on the Falcons.
Yep. I think that's all needs to be said about that game. It's pretty straightforward. So the next thing we'll talk about is New Orleans at 2-4 against Indianapolis at 3-3. Indianapolis is -4.5 at home. I mean, last game we saw was Andrew Luck came back. He went pretty ham. Do you guys see that same performance again?
Colts looked better for sure last week. I think it was so for one, Andrew Luck came back. Two, they had like a little added motivation. It was a repeat of the last year's AFC final. So who knows how much that played into effect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think their O-line specifically has looked better. Andrew Luck didn't get he had time to set his plays, and he had time to look back and look around and make his throws, which made their offense more efficient. So everything besides that dumb snap play that they ran,
Dumb.
It was dumb. I mean,
It might
the
work against the
snapper
Saints.
It was fabulous.
they weren't supposed to snap the ball. So besides that play, I liked how their offense looked this week, and I think they're gonna be pretty good. So in terms of the players that I like, I think the spread is -4. I'm on the Colts this week. In terms of players that I like, man, Gore looks better and better each week, I think. And against New Orleans, I'd say he's a play. And I think it's Hilton, Moncrief, Luck. I might even consider a stack with one of the receivers, depending on which corner seems weaker. I didn't look into the corners on New Orleans, but I might look at their stats real quick. And
They're all bad.
they're all bad. So I think either one of that is good. So I might even consider a stack with Luck. I'm not sure what the price is on Luck. Is it a little lower
He's the
than?
second most.
Okay.
He's the second highest quarterback.
So that might be the only deterrent, just because of the salary. But I think their receivers is good. The over/under looks great for the game. So
what do you guys think the percentage on Luck is going to be? Like, how many people are going to own Luck? Is it going to be chalk or not?
I don't think it's a chalk. I mean, I feel like you have Dalton, Brady.
You don't have Dalton.
Oh, this week he's on the bye.
Yep.
So you have Brady.
So here. So last week, Tom Brady was 18%, Andy Dalton was 15%, Matt Ryan was 11%, Carson Palmer was 6%, Aaron Rodgers was 5%, Drew Brees was 5%, Blake Bortles 5%, Brian Hoyer 5%, and then, so around there. So that gives you a range. If I had to guess, he'd probably be around 8 or 9%. So he would be the chalk, I would say.
Yeah, I think the only reason he was ignored last week was because there was potential he might not play.
Yeah.
And then he had a good showing, so I think maybe now he's actually a pickable option, and he did good. Fantasy wise, he did good.
3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I want to play him because of the possibility of him being chalk. I just don't know. I was thinking more like 12 to 15% because the matchup is so nice.
Mm-hmm.
It is nice. I think this matchup in general is pretty nice, right? Mostly
Yeah.
fantasy relevant. High over/under at 52.5. You sort of want to pick and choose at least 1 or 2 players from this game, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
So any players you guys don't like in this game, or really like, you guys want to make a call on this game, or at least endorse someone?
Man, so I was thinking about Cooks, him having a light up game for the Saints. I was considering that possibility. I'm not sure exactly how you guys felt. I think that's all I have. He hasn't been showing too many good things lately, but I think he might have a light up game.
Indianapolis, is it in a dome or is it outside?
I believe it's outside. I don't know for sure.
Because I think that's important.
That dictates the Drew Brees.
Drew Brees statistically does better inside a dome because his home is in a dome. When he's outside and
You rapping over there, bro?
he sucks. Yeah, he sucks.
His home is in a dome.
Rapping.
Yeah, so I think that does play a factor, and if they're in a dome, that's more reason to roll out Drew Brees even as your quarterback with a stack with Cooks. So if one of us, or I can look it up. But how about the running backs? Are you guys okay running with Ingram again? I mean, he got 2 touchdowns last week. You guys confident in rolling him out again against the Colts? I mean,
Ingram is so trolly because he doesn't look good right now. He's getting
he
like
doesn't.
2.5 to 3 yards a carry. He just looks like an average plotter type running back in the Michael Turner mold from a couple years ago. But he just gets the touch, like he gets on the 1 or 2 yard line and he's gold. Last week he had 20 attempts for 46 yards, horrible, and then he had 2 touchdowns, which made him totally fantasy relevant. And he's been doing that game after game. So yeah. I mean, they're consistently getting stuck on the 1 yard line. Roll out Ingram.
If you like getting trolled, go
Yeah.
away.
Another thing is that they got Spiller as the passing down back, and he hasn't really done anything.
up.
And Ingram is a good pass catcher, so I think they can sort of integrate Ingram back into the role that Spiller took for a couple games and sucked at.
Yeah.
So you're
For me,
fading
I
Spiller.
really like in this game Moncrief. Like I feel like this is the big Moncrief game. So
What's he priced at?
69, I think.
69.
I think 69.
69, you say?
Giggity. So yeah, I like
He's 6,500. So
wow, okay, 65, I'm all in. Give me all the Moncrief I can get. Luck clearly has a connection with Moncrief the way that Hasselbeck had a connection with Johnson in that one game. So
yes.
yeah, I really think you can go T.Y. Hilton, but he's too expensive for what he's produced, and I feel like you have the same upside, if not more, with Moncrief. So I really like Moncrief. And I think Snead, we didn't mention Snead, but Snead is going to be relevant for the rest of the year, whether we like it or not.
But
Sorry.
he said he's not as fast as he thinks. Or
What does
something
that
like
even mean?
He said something really stupid.
The thing about Snead that makes him good is his pass catching ability. He secures a lot of the balls that Brandon Cooks is not securing. So Breeze trusts him. In the red zone, he's their primary target. Who knows after Ben Watson now, but
Yeah, so to add to that, Ben Watson last week, 10 catches, 127 yards and a
He
touchdown.
had a blow-up game.
Yeah. You guys see that happening again? Like, sorry to like stop you, but
No. I saw this exact stat, and then I looked at his previous game. 3 receiving, three targets. Like, basically around 3 targets. And he had just one good game against Atlanta. So have they, like, figured it out and are going to target Ben Watson? Probably not. So,
he's
I don't
another
know.
guy like Barnage who's just been in the league forever and never been a pass catcher, and now all of a sudden he's a pass catcher. I'm not buying it. I mean, we do know that Drew Brees likes his tight end, but I'm going to need some proof. Let me see a couple more games, and then I'll judge from there.
all
He
right.
has a touchdown in his last 2 games, though.
Plus
So-
or minus 10.
God, why you got to do this?
Yes.
And in FanDuel scoring, I'll give him over 10.
I say he goes under.
And you said
again.
Barnage was under 10? Just because of the defense?
Yeah.
You scared, bro? I'm over 10 as well.
Wow. Leaving me on.
Wow, we're all on Ben
With
Watson.
With that said, I'm over 10.
All right.
What about you, Nani?
I'm off. I'm off of him.
Oh, you're off. You're under 10.
Yeah, I'm under.
Can I
10.
share what Snead said about himself? Quote,
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I don't have the best speed in the world, but I get open. That's what he said about himself.
That's all that matters is getting open. Ruben Randall is the slowest man on earth, and yet he still catches balls.
Very confident player.
And then I also have an update on the indoor-outdoor question.
All right.
Okay, so it's Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah.
It's a multi-purpose facility that can open and be closed.
Oh.
So,
So
it
So they're
depends.
gonna leave it open.
I don't know how they decide this.
Drew Brees is there. Leave it open.
Wow. That would be funny to watch, right? To see what they do with that.
Or if somehow we requested it so that every time Brees came on the field, they were required to shut the dome, and then when Luck came back out, they'd open it back up.
All right. So we good on that game?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So Minnesota
fix.
at Detroit. Minnesota is 3-2 against Detroit 1-5. They got their first win last week, and many people that did the Calvin and Stafford stack benefited last week. So Detroit is plus 2.5 at home. How do you guys feel about this game?
I think they're the key players for both teams, and we all know who they are. So for Minnesota, you got AP. Last week, a lot of people got screwed by AP, including me.
Oh yeah.
He had 26 attempts for 60 yards and no touchdowns. I think
2
he gets
yards per
back
carry.
on track here versus the Lions defense. They already played once this year in the second game when everybody was actually off of AP then because he had a bad game against the 49ers in week 1. And he had 29 attempts for 134 yards. And in that game, he was on the goal line like 3 different times and just kept getting knocked back and not in. So he almost had 2 touchdowns in that game. So it's just like a momentous stat line versus the Lions. So I kind of like Adrian Peterson here. The only downfall, obviously, is that he's 9,200. So I'm gonna try to get him in my lineup, and if I get punished again, I'm gonna be very, very sad. But the stats don't lie. Versus the Lions, in the 13 games that Adrian Peterson has played, and 10 of them he's had over 90 yards, and in the 13 games he's had 12 touchdowns. So I think you can benefit from the history, his ability, and the fact that a lot of people are going to be off of him because he burned them last week.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really like AP in this game. It's you give it all the history stats. Right now, Detroit is ranked 26th against the rush, and they've allowed 10 touchdowns so far this season. They are tied for the most touchdowns allowed on the ground, tied with Atlanta Falcons. So this is just like a good pairing, and it's almost too good. There's also I also think there might be some recency bias. Some people might be like, oh, they got burned last week from AP. They'll be scared to play him this week. So there is maybe some to gain from that, from the whole, he did so bad last week. So I also am very high on AP this week, and I will try to get him into lineups as well.
Right. So then the other player that everybody's talking about, and I actually think will be chalk, is Stephon Diggs. People like throwing the really cheap guy into their lineup to give him room everywhere else. I see him being somewhere around 10% to 15% owned.
He was 4,500 last week to now he is at 5,800. That's a $1,300 increase.
FanDuel saw it, and so did the rest of the world. He's on all the waiver wire pickup things. Like, I'm not touching him. I don't want, and I'm for the season, and I'm going to say this now, I'm never going to want anybody in the Vikings passing game.
All right.
Are you getting all this on record, like record?
It's already
No,
recording.
I'm making a new lineup. I'm making a new FanDuel lineup and putting
Putting in all the receivers. I think
Putting
last
in
week
lots
is an
of-
anomaly. They played one of the worst pass defenses in the league, and the only way you can attack them is with pass. As we saw, Adrian Peterson on 26 attempts did nothing. So they were forced to throw the ball to get the ball moving, and the production of that was throwing to Diggs a lot and throwing to Wallace a lot. Even with all of the targets, Wallace did nothing, and Diggs didn't even get a touchdown. They scored 16 points in the game. Like the passing game is not for me, and I actually think Bridgewater isn't as good of a quarterback as we thought he was last year.
Wow, rough.
Sorry, are either of you guys on Bridgewater or parts of the passing game?
I'm not on Bridgewater, so I'm okay with that.
I think if you had someone was forcing you to play a wide receiver for the Vikings, you do play Diggs. If someone put a gun to my head and was like, pick one, you have to play him in this league, I would pick Diggs. Mike Wallace, he doesn't look too impressive so far. Diggs is outplaying him. I mean, yeah, Diggs last week had a good game against Kansas City, which was bad. But the week before that, before their bye, they played against Denver, and in his first game, he was able to pull 87 yards on 6 catches. That's pretty decent against the Denver defense, which is touted as the best defense this year. So I think there's, he is somewhat talented, and we'll need more games to see how talented he is. But I think, in terms of if I had to play one, it would be him. Am I playing him this week? Probably not. At a cost of 5,800, that's a lot higher than I would like to pay for him. I mean, 5,800. There's not a lot of good options at 5,800, so I'm not even gonna list it. Actually, Kendall Wright is at 5,700, and he's not the best, but I think he's a little bit more of a better play.
Is he a Josh Huff caliber?
God.
So good.
And that it's a barren wasteland. I don't want to list the other names on there.
So in the 5,800, he's actually a reasonable choice then.
People are calling him the
almost.
next Odell Beckham Jr.
I mean, if you can stretch your wallet a little bit, you can play like let's see,
Moncrief.
Eric Decker at 6,200, Moncrief at 6,500, Snead at 65 is a little high for me.
But still better than Diggs.
Jordan Matthews 6,600. I think I'm okay with that too. I don't know. So it's a little more debate. We'll talk about that later. In terms of other players. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so for Detroit, again, these two are in the same division, so there's a lot of history. Calvin Johnson for 8,400 doesn't have a good enough history both this year and versus the Vikings. His one touchdown before this last week was against the Vikings, but it was on low yardage. And over 14 games against the Vikings, he's only scored 7 touchdowns. So about 50% of the time you're going to like the game, and another 50% of the time you're not going to like the game. And he's also only gotten 2 games over 100 yards over those 14 games. So just the statistics versus the Vikings don't bode well for him. Mm-hmm. And I also kind of want to see it again. Like last week he was versus the Bears, which is notoriously one of the worst defenses in football. Is like Kansas City, Bears, and Jacksonville, right? And these are the defenses you target. The Vikings are actually in the top of both passing and running categories in terms of defense. So I don't want to take a risk on Calvin at this price point, and the same goes for Tate. I'm only really sticking with Tate in like a full point PPR format because he'll get you like 7 catches and 50 yards, which in cash is fine. But for half point PPR and no PPR, like in a standard league, I'm not really touching Tate either. And Abdullah, last time they played the Vikings, was 6 carries for 9 yards. So I'm not touching Abdullah either.
What about Theo? You think he'll get more play if Abdullah keeps on putting the ball on the ground? He might make an interesting play.
He could be an interesting play, but it is one of those wait-and-see scenarios. Last week I had mentioned that when Joik Bell was active, that Theo Riddick got no play. And then this last game, Joik Bell was active, and Theo Riddick got no play until the second half when Abdullah was pretty much taken out of the game. So I think we see more Joik. We might see less Riddick. But I do think it's a situation to keep our eyes on, given the fact that Abdullah's stock is definitely decreasing and Riddick's is increasing.
Neither is DFS play. Would you agree?
Right.
No. Yeah. Theo Riddick is 5,200. Amir Abdullah is 5,700. Yeah, they're not daily. You don't play them in cash. On Tony, you might, and if anyone, I would probably go Amir, just because he probably will get the bulk of the carries again. You would hope, unless he drops it on his first carry, then he's sort of screwed.
Right. One of the things with Theo Riddick that I kind of have a problem with is he's super game flow dependent. Yeah. He's only in the game if they're in a battle and a high scoring battle. And even then, he's never produced like a GPP type performance. Like I've never gotten 25 out of him. So I would really, really be gambling playing him in any format.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing we'll talk about is Pittsburgh at Kansas City. Pittsburgh is 4-2 versus Kansas City, who are 1-5. They are in Kansas City, and the spread and stuff are off, so they don't have the line yet, unless you guys have it. You guys.
There's a line on Sportsbook Spy which says that the Chiefs are -3.5.
-3.5 Chiefs?
Yeah, supposedly it opened at +1 and moved to -3.5, and I think that was like
How
the
many
news.
bets were there? Like a lot.
This was on actually not Sportsbook Spy. It was on the covers. Is where we look for our list.
Sure.
Is where we have our list for what games we do in what order. And I think the original logic here was that they thought Ben Roethlisberger was coming back, so KC was +1. And then they were like, oh, he might not be coming back. We have Landry Jones, the third string guy, because no Vic. Let's make it Kansas City -3.
Hey, Landry had a touchdown pass. Come on.
He had 2 touchdown passes.
Yeah. Oh, he had 2. That's right.
Yeah. So he was 8 for 12, 168, and 2 touchdowns, and I actually think that was pretty good. And the logic I had earlier about Jameis Winston at 6,500 is even more true for this Landry Jones fellow at 6,000. I didn't consider when I was putting that together that they were at KC. And I don't want to play a third-string quarterback at KC. The home field advantage there is too much. There's no way that this dude's going to do really well. He'll probably throw a couple picks. So I guess I'm going to sort of back off on my Landry Jones. So I don't like Landry Jones now. Antonio Brown I still think is overpriced. He's at 8,300. And in that area, you can get Brandon Marshall, Keenan Allen, Edelman, Fitz. So if you do play Antonio Brown, it's only a tourney play, hoping for the him to go to the touchdown in like the Martavius Bryant fashion from last week.
Sure.
So I'm not really touching Antonio Brown. I do like Martavis Bryant because the KC defense can be attacked in the pass, and Martavis Bryant is sort of that deep threat. The only thing I don't like is that he's probably going to be a pretty public play because everybody saw that 88-yard touchdown, and he's only 6,900. So I don't want to have a lot of Martavis Bryant, but I feel like because so many people will, I do want to have a little part of him.
Yeah, Antonio Brown's 8,300 and Martavis Bryant is 6,900.
What about Hayward Bay?
Hayward Bay is not in the picture anymore.
Let me
Oh, he's
scroll
done,
down.
though?
Let me scroll
No, he's
way
not done
down.
so, but I just would never use
He's
him anyway.
at 4,900 if you really feel like playing with fire.
Too risky for me, man. I'm not touching Hayward Bay.
Yeah.
The last player I didn't mention was Le'Veon Bell, who's 8,900. He's the highest price running back with AP. And it's a pretty bad matchup versus KC because we saw what happened to AP last week.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't want to have that again. And he's hard to fit in a lineup when you're trying to shove Freeman, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio, and Odell. Like, I don't see myself playing him anywhere.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm pretty scared of him right
Too
now.
scared.
Yeah, and then for KC, I literally have a blob here. My note is that I'm not really touching anyone. The Pitt defense has become more relevant. Alex Smith is the second most quarterback in the NFL with 23 sacks. Pittsburgh defense is averaging 2 turnovers a game. They're the 4th best defense against fantasy running backs. They're pretty vulnerable to the pass, but Alex Smith is throwing the ball, and he doesn't really have any receivers because Macklin's got a concussion. Kelsey's there. I suppose you could go for Kelsey. I think it's a decent matchup. I think they're 31st against the tight end. But because Kelsey's sort of been on and off, more off than on, I am not playing him for his cost.
Yeah, he needs to go down in price. Like, what the heck? Like,
yeah, I don't know what's going on
it's
here.
the same every week. It doesn't make sense.
Yep.
So I agree. You are losing value on Kelsey. He hasn't been producing like a top end tight end to be paying that much.
Right, he's right up there with Olsen and Graham, and it's like no.
Yeah, and they've been every now and then, but they've been producing some pretty big numbers to warrant that price tag. Not Kelsey.
You guys have any thoughts on another fantasy relevant player named Santos?
No, we're not talking about kickers.
Okay, so we actually have a question on Twitter. This guy says, should he drop Ellington for Shane Vereen or Alfred Morris? And he's starting whichever one we choose. He says he has no other options or bench room. And because I'm assuming... No, Ellington's playing, but you can't play Ellington, so... Vereen or Morris?
I don't want to play Ellington this week, but I do like him better in terms of long term. Like, I think eventually the Arizona Cardinals will go back to Ellington.
He says no other options, man.
I know.
You have to take Vereen or Alfred Morris.
Well, this week you're saying you're saying the backup to Alfred Morris, right?
That's like a hard one.
I know. I think if it's PPR, you probably go Vereen, and I think if it's not PPR, you go Morris, because the chance of volume for Morris is higher than it is for Vereen.
That's the only argument.
What did
I agree with
last
that.
week?
Nothing.
Plus, they're versus Tampa Bay.
Ellington had 1 carry and 47 yards. He had 1 carry for 7 yards, and he had 2 catches for 47 yards. So he's acting like a pass down back. I just roll him out.
Acting like a WR4.
Yeah, I just roll him out.
Over Vereen or Alfred Morris.
Wait, who? Oh, against Baltimore? Yeah, I'll roll him out.
Ellington?
Yeah. I roll him out and just hope for the future. And if it's PPR, if it's PPR, even better.
Interesting.
I don't think you lose it. Like, if it's a roster league, I don't think you lose out on that value on Ellington just to drop him to the waiver. Like, I don't know. That's just my opinion. How do you guys? You guys like Vereen?
No, Alfred Morris. Both of us said Morris.
Yeah.
Morris?
I don't think you can roll a Ellington, at least for a while. Like, they've shown... Look, so it's a clear RB1, right? David Johnson? I'm going to get this wrong.
It's Shane Vereen and Alfred Morris.
No, the Arizona running backs.
Ellington. Oh,
No,
David. Yeah, you're right. Chris
David
Johnson and David Johnson.
Yeah, the clear RB1 is Chris Johnson. Like,
yes.
and then the clear end zone carrier is David Johnson. And Ellington has just no role except
He's the
to
pass down back, just like Vereen is.
he's just getting out there. Like I've never seen him get too much play.
His argument still stands, though. Alfred Morris is an RB1 for sure. The other guys are not. The other guys are pass down backs.
Right.
Not a fan.
Okay.
We're gonna have to move on.
Okay, so I guess where we were at was, does anybody want anybody on KC? Does anybody want a part of KC?
No.
No? Nani? Do
Maybe
you
a
care about Charizard West?
No.
You don't want any Charizard?
No, they can rot. Unless I see something cool from them, they can rot. If anyone, no, even Kelsey's too overpriced. No, I don't want anyone from KC.
Santos.
If Macklin comes back, he's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
If the spreads look really off, the defense could be sneaky. If it's, I don't know, like
KC defense.
yeah, like how else does Pittsburgh score? They rely on the third string quarterback or Vic, and
Or
then,
Le'Veon.
Yeah, I mean KC defense has been decent against the run, so they'll have to find some other way to score. It's gonna be like the same game as the Vikings. They're like they can't throw, they have to force it in the run 26 times for no yards. I don't know.
I'm actually on the other side of that. I like the Pittsburgh defense.
Yeah, I like the Pittsburgh defense too, but if the spreads open up weird, that's a reason to try to be sneaky, I think. I don't know. Just a sneaky play. I'm not confident at all. I'm not putting that in cash at all. Maybe attorney somewhere, but no. Right.
Kelsey over under 12.
Under.
Over.
Over. I'm over.
All right. So next game we'll talk about is Cleveland at St. Louis. Cleveland is 2-4 against St. Louis 2-3. St. Louis is at home. They're now -5.5.
-5.5. Wow. Yeah. So they're off a bye and they're at home, so that's always a really good thing. That means they're really rested. I like St. Louis in the game. I only really like one player in the game, and I said him earlier. It's Todd Gurley. He's cheap given his upside. Like I said, I think he has Freeman-type upside, and he's versus the 28th ranked defense against the run. And he even got 150 yards. Let's see. Was it against Denver that he did that? No, it was Green Bay, right?
Green Bay.
Yeah, so I think he has a potential of getting a lot more yards given that the defense is bad. Versus Arizona, he got 146. Versus Green Bay, he got 159. Like, versus the Browns, he could get a billion. Like, there's potential there for a lot of
are ranked
production.
last against the rush, so
Yep.
they're
149 yards per game, average.
That's
Right,
what
and
he's getting.
Yeah. So he can probably surpass that, and he's only 7,400, which is like a steal given the upside there, and the floor is incredibly high. I feel like on him, given that he's like producing so well against good defenses without getting any touchdowns. So I really like Todd Gurley, and I feel like if you're trying to avoid Freeman, he's like sort of the next option for me.
You can always throw him in there too. Tag team.
Yeah, you could put them both in.
But I mean, yeah, the yardage is good. The more promising thing is that he got 30 attempts, man. 30 carries. That's a ton of carries. A lot of opportunity, higher floor, right? So he's like a good safe play. Like he'll get his yardage, he'll get his carries, and if he finds the end zone, you're gonna cash out. So I also am really high on Gurley this week. But be warned, he will most likely be a chalk play. People will be really high on him as well. It just seems so clear and so easy that people will have him for his price. So.
Yep. I feel like the only thing that makes him less of a chalk play is the fact that other people are going to be trying to shove Devontae Freeman and DeAndre Hopkins in their lineup, which makes it so they have to enter someone really cheap into their second running back spot.
Yeah.
So as far as the passing game, I think that all of the St. Louis options are GPP flyers. Jared Cook at 5,200. The Cleveland defense has either really given up points to the tight ends around 20, or they've given up absolutely nothing. So he's not a certain play. Tavon Austin is actually having a hamstring issue. I feel like he's always in consideration for a GPP play. Never cash, but a guy who's as fast as him and is part of the punt game, if his hamstring's an issue, it's actually more of a risk because people like that, like Deshaun Jackson, for example, who hasn't came back since his hamstring injury. These are guys that are more risky because the injury and the way that they play don't bode well with each other. So Tavon Austin's okay. Brian Quick is a guy to keep an eye on. I'm not playing him, but his snap count over the last 2 weeks has been increasing. So keep an eye out for Brian Quick, who's pretty close to the minimum. On Cleveland, Josh McCown was a popular play a couple weeks ago, and then this week he sort of came back to earth versus the Denver defense. The Denver defense, but St. Louis defense is almost as good as the Denver defense, so I'm not touching Josh McCown. And as I talked about earlier, I'm not touching Barnage. I feel like versus the Denver defense, he got 2 fluky touchdowns, and other than that, he wasn't really a factor. And against the St. Louis defense, I'm just not touching tight ends for the entire season. Jeff Fisher just stomps out the tight ends.
They weren't fluky, man. He caught him over his head, the defender. He was well covered, caught it over the head.
The fact that they were in the red zone then was fluky.
They're not
The whole
fluky.
nature of the Cleveland offense right now is a giant fluke. They're scoring 30 points a game on a fluke.
Barnage is not garbage.
Barnage is garbage. Right now, against these teams, I think we shouldn't be expecting much. Like, out of the touchdowns, he got 39 yards. Like, that's not dependable. On 3 catches, like, what? He caught, of his 9 targets, he caught 3 of the balls. Like, I don't know.
It is noted.
The player that I am looking at, and this is a GPP play, but I actually want him, like, there's a lot of GPPs play, but the people that I actually want, Travis Benjamin, in the last game he had 9 targets for 117 yards. Over the season he's had 51 targets, which ranks him among the top 20. Yeah. He's had over 10 targets in the last 4 games. He's averaging around 13. This is more than any other season, so he's finally sort of having his breakout season. He's explosive, so if anybody's going to get past that defense, it's him. So I kind of like Travis Benjamin in tournaments with a lot of exposure.
What about the running backs? None?
For Cleveland?
For Cleveland.
No, I think for a while there we could have considered Duke Johnson, but now the introduction of Robert Turbin makes it a 3-man committee the same way that Washington is a 3-man committee, and we can't touch them confidently.
I agree. You just stay away from that situation in general. I think that's all we have for those games, huh? Yeah, that game?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. The next game we're talking about is Houston at Miami. Houston is 2-4 against Miami 2-3. Miami is at home and they're -4 at home. This, if you guys watched last week, Miami was revitalized after their coach got fired. Their tight end coach took over. I don't know. Just real quick, I was telling Abimitz about this, is that I feel like last week in terms of Miami, it was just so fairy tale like, right? You fire the coach, and then they make all these promises. They're gonna run the ball. They're going to they're going to fix their defense. They're gonna get sacks, and they're gonna win games, and they're gonna be good again. And it's the tight end coach, so you expect the tight end to get play, right? All of a sudden, we come out. Lamar Miller opens up the game with a really 19 carries, right? Which he's that's triple what he's been getting all year, and he gets a touchdown and 100 yards. The defense gets 6 sacks, and they score the most fantasy points last week, right? Defense, and then the tight end also, Jordan Cameron, gets a touchdown, as well as the other tight end. They both get touchdowns, right? Deion Sims is also So it's it just seems so fairy tale like. It's almost, I don't know, it's just too good to be true. Do you guys buy into Miami being a good team now?
They looked good against Titans. Okay, so one thing I saw was their defensive lineman, Cameron Wake. He was beating everyone he was going up against on the line, and he was getting most of the majority of those sacks, and eventually, got Mariota hurt. He looked good. He did not look good. This defensive line did not look good in all the other weeks. So I would buy into the fact that Miami defense, which was good last year, right, is back after a shaky beginning. So I'm buying into their defense. And if they look good, I think if they keep up with the running game, they could have a good game. Before the season started, and he looked good. Jarvis Landry looks better now. I think they have all the pieces, and if their defense keeps it up, gives their offense more chances, then I think I'm going to buy in.
Yeah, so I think I agree, and I feel like there's always this little grace period after the new coach comes in where everybody's like, yeah, this guy's awesome, and this guy's like approaching the team as if he's like a drill sergeant, like, we're going to run the ball, we're going to jam it down their throats, and we're going to throw to the tight ends. Like, just his mentality is one that is initially effective, but on a bunch of grown men could easily wear off. So, it's just, when do you jump off the bandwagon? The way you just described this and it didn't make me think of it until then, but you're right. Cameron Wake and Suh they had 0 sacks until this game. And then the offense, the same way, wasn't doing anything. So it kind of makes you think that the whole team had given up on Joe Philbin. And now they're sort of like, oh, Joe Philbin's gone, hey? We can show our true skill. And I think Wake got 4 sacks in that game or more.
Yeah, he did.
It's just, like, how do you just pile up 4 sacks? I know at some point Mariota became pretty immobile, but 4 sacks is pretty significant coming off 6 games with 0.
Yeah. Any big players you guys want to play on the Miami side? Or would like to play? Targeting?
Everyone else also on Miami, I'm not going to buy into their offense yet. So I'm on their defense. I'm not going to buy into their offense yet. The only player I might consider is Lamar. He looked good, but he might be a public play now just because he had a good week.
He's still worth it, though. 6,700?
Yeah, exactly. That's the only
value.
reason, the salary cap. So that's all I have for Miami. For Houston, Hopkins, he's a chalk play. I really like Foster now. Like he's been looking good. I think people are catching on, but he's catching a lot more along with his carries, which makes him even more valuable in FanDuel. And I think that Miami is the worst in terms of giving up. So they give up the most yards against and attempts against the run. So I think it's good on paper, but because of the Miami defense revitalizing, I may consider eating up my words here.
So you do like Foster in this game?
I haven't decided. So,
You're undecided on Foster?
Yeah. He looks good. He's catching more, so PPR value is there. He's running well. And Miami, I'll probably still consider him.
He's 8,600.
Yeah, so that might be a deterrent.
Above him would be Freeman, and below him would be Lynch.
I would rather have both those guys.
Exactly.
At the price point.
Yeah, exactly.
I also, if we are buying into the defense a little bit, it is a little scary to play Foster. Yeah.
Hopkins can still play.
Yeah, I think you have to play Hopkins. The targets are just too insane. And when they start to struggle, they pretty much only target him. And he is an acrobat, so he's going to catch even in a lot of coverage.
Is there anywhere where you guys would do a stack of Foster and Hopkins? Or is that just too hefty?
I feel like last week that was an option versus Jacksonville.
It worked last week.
Jacksonville versus Jacksonville, it worked.
I mean, Miami. Besides last week, Miami was like the worst defense in the league.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm not just going to ignore that. There was a regime change, and
yeah, that's typically when the drastic changes happen. Like whenever a major player gets cut, or like a coaching change, head coach change.
Right,
and they just look too good.
Just the fact that the question's out there is, could they be good? Could they be bad? Should be enough to make me say, I'm not playing 2 players on the team opposing them. You pick the guy you think who's going to do better, which I think all of us in this case think Hopkins, and then you ignore Foster. Again, that leaves open the door for playing Foster and getting him at low ownership because the rest of the world sees that. I'm actually against you on the Miami offense. I'm actually all in on the Miami offense. Even when they were bad, Landry was relevant. And then with the coaching change, Landry was still relevant. He was part of the run game. He was part of the pass game. He's their top red zone threat. That may change a little bit with the tight end focus. They're now throwing to Deion Sims a lot more than they were before, which is a little bit annoying. And I absolutely love Rashard Matthews. Is his name Rashard Matthews? That's it, right? Yeah, absolutely love Rashard Matthews because this guy is getting insane amounts of targets, insane amounts of yards, and because he's not getting touchdowns, people aren't sort of on him as much as they are on the other parts of the offense. So I think Rashard Matthews is still totally in play.
You guys aren't scared of Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker might steal some play and all that?
Both those guys are deep threats, and Tannehill does not throw deep, usually.
Yeah.
Kenny Stills was listed as either the second string or third string guy and got like 2 catches on 3 targets. Like he didn't do anything.
Yep.
So he doesn't scare me at all. And Devontae Parker seems to be in the doghouse right now.
Would you guys
Maybe it's a
ever?
clear cut. Yeah.
Would you ever stack Tannehill with any of those players? Does Tannehill
Yeah.
play?
Landry, if you had to ask, like, if I had to choose.
I think even Cameron might be a play too. He's pretty cheap.
I'm not feeling Cameron just because of the fact that now Deion Sims is a factor. So whatever Cameron was going to get is now split in half. They had the same amount of catches, and the plays were really drawn up for Deion Sims. Like he was catching screens behind the line. You know, Jordan Cameron got his play in garbage time in that game, which was like totally surprising to me. But I think if I'm stacking with anybody, I'm stacking with Landry and Rashard Matthews.
I think they have to like show me one more good offensive game, and then I'll like totally buy in.
Yeah.
I'm just not in it yet.
Yeah.
All the pieces are there.
One stack that I'm sort of building around and using in some lineups this week is Hoyer and DeAndre Hopkins.
Mhm.
Yeah, I am not sold on Miami yet, and so I am going to take advantage of that and just play Hoyer because I believe in DeAndre Hopkins, and if I believe in DeAndre Hopkins, I'm just gonna pair him up with Hoyer for his price tag. He was priced at only 6,900, so that's around Colin Kaepernick, Alex Smith, Derek Carr,
Yep.
Mariota, Fitzpatrick, Tyrod Taylor, Stafford. So I think he was reasonable for his price, especially if I believe in DeAndre Hopkins. I might as well just stack him with them. So that's something that I'm looking into as a potential stack.
I like the strategy.
All right. So the last game we'll talk about is the New York Jets at New England. The Jets are 4-1, and which they're doing really good. And then they're going up against the Pats, who have also been doing very good at 5-0. And the Pats are -9 at home.
Yep.
Is this another Tom Brady onslaught of the other team where they just just pound them into the ground, or what?
So you know me, I'm a heavy Pats fan, but this game I'm not feeling as much of a like beat him into the ground. I still think they'll win, but I don't think they're gonna beat him into the ground. I think they're gonna have a tougher game offensively, just because the Jets' defense is just so good this season. They've allowed the least number of points this season, 15 points per game. They only allow 82 rushing yards. Passing yards is also low, 186 per game. They're just a very good offensive team or defensive team. But maybe the Pats fan in me says their defense is overrated. They hasn't really been like put to the test yet. So they lost against Philly, which their only loss of the season, and I consider them that having the best, like having a good offense. I say this with quotes, having a good offense. But they played against Washington, the Browns, Miami, and the Colts. And the Colts was like in the beginning stages when they didn't have their O-line figured out. So I think the Philly was the best offense they played against and gave up 24 points. So I'm not gonna. So I think the public sees that the Jets have a great defense on paper so far. I'm not going to believe all of it, so I'm going to take the minus points and pick New England. But you guys should correct me for the bias factor. So that's what I think about the game. I think Brandon Marshall looked great. Ivory looked great too. So I'm actually thinking Ivory as a pick. New England is not that greatest against the run defensively, so I like the way Ivory runs. He runs like a beast. He looks like Marshawn Lynch when Marshawn Lynch was really good 2 years ago. 2 years ago? 1 year ago? Last year and the year before that. That's what he runs like. He just runs to break people and take 2 more yards from them. And
He has moxie.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like him in this game too. I like Brandon Marshall because I think they might be playing catch up a little bit. Uh, on New England, usual suspects, Edelman, Gronk. I think this is a Gronk touchdown, 2 touchdown game. One touchdown, 2 touchdown with a 100-yard game. So I like Gronk here. I'm going to stay away from New England's rushing game, just because I don't know. I don't know who's gonna do it, Lewis or Blunt. So I'm feeling Gronk, Marshall, and Ivory in this game.
Interesting.
Yeah, to add on to that, the Jets are ranked second against the rush, and they've only allowed 1 touchdown all season. Against the pass, they're ranked second with 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So they're a
Yeah.
pretty good defense. New England, on the other hand, is 22nd against the rush and allowed 3 touchdowns, and against the pass, they're 15th with 9 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So they're a little bit more susceptible in terms of defense. The Pats are, but we all know how good the Pats are on offense, and it could turn into this big catch-up game. So,
Do you guys take any flyers on Brandon LaFell?
no.
Oh, nope.
Wow.
Nope. I mean, you wouldn't play any of the Pats running backs, right?
I would play Blount.
Blount, really?
Interesting.
Every time you play a game that's going to be a defensive battle, that's when you take Blount. I think. No, wait.
It's the other way. It's the
Wait.
other way
No.
around.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me correct myself here. I think it's a Blount game still. The only reason I'm against it is because Dion Lewis was, for some reason, cut out
Oh.
last week,
He was
and
slightly injured.
I know, and the update is that he's still injured, and it's, what is it, a cracked rib?
Something about his rib, yeah.
Ugh. I don't want anything to do with that. Like, I agree the Jets' defense is formidable, but I feel the same way about Blount that I feel about Ingram, and that the Pats' offense is going to move down the field, and they're going to be close to the end zone, and they're just going to hand it to Blount, and he's just going to have a free reign in. And if Dion Lewis isn't a factor like he was last week, then potential of 2 touchdowns is there. I like your call on Gronk. I am scared a little bit of Edelman just because we don't know where Revis is playing.
Mm-hmm.
And Revis and Brady are going to have some like crazy rivalry going on because they were on each
Yeah.
other's teams and they've been facing each other for years.
Yeah.
It's just,
The revenge game.
yeah, so I'm actually a little bit scared of playing Edelman. And then for the Jets, it's another questionable situation because Belichick always does one thing, and that's shut out what he thinks is the biggest attribute to the opposing offense. And is that Chris Ivory or is that Brandon Marshall?
Mm.
And whichever guy you take, you have to hope that it's not that guy that they're game planning against.
Then
So
why
I'm
not-
actually scared of all
Why
of
not
this.
play Decker then?
Yeah, that's a good option.
Yeah.
He's not game planning for Decker. And Decker's history over the last 6-7 games has been that he's gotten a touchdown in each of them. So he's salvaging his low yardage totals with touchdowns.
Yeah, but that gets you like 12, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I
In
like
cash,
Decker.
that's okay.
yeah.
I mean, you guys are both liking Gronk. Does he warrant the 8,300 price tag? I think it's 8,300.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not really
8,100.
feeling strong.
Okay.
Like last week, I was really feeling Delaney Walker. This week, I'm not particularly feeling anyone else. So I think you just gamble on Gronk. And like I said before, people will be trying to shove Freeman and Hopkins in, and that makes it incredibly hard for them to get Gronk. So yeah, I think Gronk's going to be in a few cash lineups of mine. He's always in 50% of my cash lineup.
Yeah. Anyone you guys are fading?
You guys are fading Brandon LaFell.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
fading
actually fading Edelman, yeah.
Yeah.
Just because of
Edelman.
the risk of Revis. And
Yeah.
he was hurt last game, his finger got messed up.
Yep.
Amendola
Sorry,
would be an interesting GPP play. Because he had, what do you have, 6 catches for 105 yards
Yeah,
last
yeah,
game?
Yeah, 100 yards.
Yeah.
It's totally relevant in a game where nobody thought he was going to be relevant. So
Yeah. If you got a touchdown in there, it's totally playable. And
Yeah.
DFS too.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
So for fades, we're fading Dion Lewis.
Fading Edelman.
We're not playing Fitzpatrick either.
I'm fading both running backs for the Pats. I don't like either.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
I believe in the Jets defense enough at least to stop the run, and I'm okay fading just both running backs. I think there are better options out there. So
Yeah. The only thing that scares me about this game is that the public is on the Jets. And the
Mhm.
Yeah,
only
they
time
are.
the
It
public
is.
was on the Jets against New England, who is like known as the public team, was when they played the Bills
Yeah.
and actually made New England an underdog. And New England was like, we ain't having this.
Yeah, that does scare me quite a bit. That they are
Yeah, I
favored
see that.
favored in terms of betting. But I think that's all we have for this segment. In terms of talking about all the games.
It's a long stream.
It is a pretty long stream. We do have a
A lot
couple
of games.
viewers. Let's see. Any questions? Any other questions we have? La Kimika is asking. Last week you guys did the best player under 5K, and you all picked one to see who would get the most points. Who won?
The person that designed this pick.
The
won.
person who made up the little contest right here.
Diggs
But
beat
we can say the
Amendola?
order.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Stefan
Oh, well.
Diggs
We can
was
say the
priced
order.
at 4,500, and he had what was it, 8 catches for 100.
God, why do we gotta do this?
Yeah, we're gonna do
Right?
this.
So Amendola was priced at 4,800, right? 4,800,
4800.
and he had like 8 catches or something like that for 105 yards. And then who did you have?
Keyshawn
Who did you
Martin.
have of admits?
I don't even know the guy's name.
Keyshawn Martin, I know it.
Keyshawn Martin. Keyshawn Martin, who had how many catches?
One.
1 catch. He had 1 catch for was it like 15 yards?
38.
38. Oh, that's pretty good.
And a red zone target. He had it in the end zone. He dropped it.
Yeah. So that was that. So.
Oh, we're not
keep
gonna
on
hear
making
about
up these mini games that
Daniels?
go in my favor, guys.
No, that was Amendola.
There we go. His was Amendola, who was 7 for 100.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all we have. No any more questions, I think we're done for the night. So far we talked about week 7. We talked about the early games. We've given our input on most of the games. And that's all I have. You guys want to do a little follow us thing?
Yeah, follow us on Twitter at FantasyLabrats. We have a YouTube, FantasyLabrats, and if you have any questions, email us at FantasyLabrats@gmail.com, and we'll answer on the next show, which is tomorrow, your start versus sit questions.
That is it. So join us tomorrow, guys. I'm Nani signing out. I'm joined by Oven Mitts and Square. See you guys tomorrow.
Peace.